Hello, class, and welcome to today's online presentation on Don't Just Manage Your Classroom, Lead Your Learners. I'm Natalie Bradford. I'm so glad that you all could join us. Now, you will notice that your mics are currently muted. If for some reason you have any questions or would like to interject, just go ahead and press the F6 button on your computer and it will unmute you. So let's go ahead and begin. Oftentimes people ask me, what's the difference between being a leader of your classroom and just managing your class? Well, just to let you know a little bit about myself as I go into this story, I've been a facilitator for 18 years, and I have the highest number of associates still with the company because my attrition is very low. Even though the experience for education and the company starts in the classroom, those bonds actually transcend outside of it. So if we can become a leader in our classes for our learners, they can take that experience and the growth that they got during that time, and it will carry them further through the company and the organization. A good example of this is there were two different teachers, and we had just acquired a new program called Synchronize, and some of you may be familiar with it in your classroom. Well, one of the teachers was having a really hard time with Synchronize, and she was not really utilizing it very well. When her classes were coming out, they really didn't get any benefit from this new piece of technology. On the other hand, there was another teacher who was actually utilizing it and was actually leading her class in discussion and innovation using this new tool. So when we looked at the differences, one teacher was actually using it just to monitor and police the class. So even though they were using the tool, they weren't using it to the best of their ability. All they were doing was telling the class that they could see their monitors and then freezing their computers when they wanted their attention. But they weren't using it as an actual education tool. The other teacher, however, was leading her class. Even though she knew that she could use these tools that were in Synchronize, she actually used it to lead her class in discussions. She knew that some of her learners may not want to raise their hand and speak out, but that they could use this new piece of technology to interact with each other or with the teacher. So that way they could become part of an open dialogue session, and it wasn't just as a policing tool. So that is a good way to think about what's the difference between managing and leading. And that's what we're going to go over today. We don't want to just manage our classes. We want to lead them. So our objectives today are going to be stating the difference in leading and managing techniques in a classroom. We're going to list the criteria to become an effective leader. And we're going to participate in a short leadership activity. So what is the difference between managing and leading? So if you're looking at the PowerPoint displayed on your screen, you'll see that there are intersecting parts. So let's look here on the right side about managing and then compare it to what leading is. For managing, it's more about policy and procedures. Where leading, you're creating a vision and strategy. So when you're doing that in your classes, you're showing them what the overall picture is going to be. Leading, you're going to be creating value. Managing, you're going to be counting value. That's a big difference, creating value versus counting value. Leading, you are going to influence and inspire. Managing is more about power and control. Leading, you have followers. Managing, you have subordinates. And think about those words, subordinates. It means that you're lower, and that's how they feel. Leading is more people-focused, where managing is work-focused. Leading, you're going to be developing people, whereas managing, you're just trying to figure out how they can get the work done. Leading, you're going to be charismatic style. Managing is more authoritative. Leading is risk and change seekers. That means that you're trying to find people who actually want to take risk and create change. Whereas with managing, it's risk averse and stability. A manager kind of doesn't want to go outside the box as much because they're afraid that it might hurt the overall picture, whereas someone leading is going to actually ask, hey, how can we see this differently and how can we do it differently? Leading is the appeal to the heart. A leader can actually motivate people to do things that they never thought that they could do just because of that inspiration, whereas managing, it appeals to the head. If you're managing, you're just replying back to the supervisors for your classroom or the VPs for your classes. You're not actually addressing the learner's needs. And that's why we want to see more leading. Leading is proactive. Managing is reactive. Leading sets direction. Managing plans details. The difference with that is you're setting direction. Leading, you want to guide people on their way and show them the path, whereas managing, you just plan the details out. We also have leading as raising the expectations. Managing is maintaining the status quo. And leading, you're going to be asking questions. You're going to be asking open-ended questions to get people to start thinking for themselves, whereas managing is just giving you directions and telling you what to do. But we want to develop our learners and make them more a part of our classes. Overall, if you take both managing and leading together, you're going to accomplish goals, explain visions, have organizational figureheads, and motivate others to mobilize resources. So we do want to have both parts, but you want to make sure that one is not emerging more than the other. And in terms of more, you want to be more of a leader than just a manager. So you might be asking yourself, what is wrong with managing? Well, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it can be better. Because if you take just managing into play without leading, then you're actually not going to have an overall good outcome for your classes because you might be too stern. Managing does provide structure, but it can be too restrictive, where people are contained, but they don't have room to grow. And that's what we want. People have room to grow and develop. And like I said before, that growth, if it's inhibited, then people are not going to be seeking out changes or way to do anything differently. So let's go ahead and talk about what's good about being a leader in the classroom. Because a leader is someone who people will follow without forcing them. They have the ability to get the most out of their employees by giving them a little bit more of themselves. They make students feel safe, provide classroom environment to thrive, collaborate on decisions, and give guidance by knowing a way and showing the way and assisting along the way. A good example of this about being a good leader in the classroom is we had a facilitator a few years back, and everyone had to be at work at 8 a.m. But she told her students that she would open up her classroom at 7:30 for anyone who got there early, but that because it's not work time, they could not talk about anything work-related. Upon their arrival, the teacher already had the classroom open, and she was eating her breakfast. As students would come in, she would say, go ahead, have a seat anywhere you like, and if you would like to join me in breakfast, you can. Well, all of a sudden, a change took place in her classroom. People started coming in a little earlier, not because they were getting paid for it, not because they had to, but because they started liking eating breakfast together with their leader in their classroom. Her one rule was that they couldn't talk about work, but they could talk about any other thing that was work appropriate. And people started feeling connected, and they saw her as a leader and not just someone who's just going to manage what they do. They felt that connection. So that's why we want to be a leader in the classroom, because our classes are going to feel that connection. So when I was thinking about the best way to describe being a leader, one other thing that came to mind was babies. And I know that as we teach adults, we don't want to think of them as children, as babies. However, if we take that simple concept of what a baby is and apply it to our classrooms, and we see ourselves as parents, then we might be able to see the correlation. And an example of that is a baby who's always held. So you have a baby, you're always holding them in your arms, keeping them close, never letting them down. versus a parent who holds their baby, but then sometimes they let them crawl and play on the floor. Well, first thing is, if you let them crawl and play on the floor, you want to make sure it's a safe and clean environment. Same thing in our classrooms. We want it to be a safe, clean environment. And we want to make sure that it's open so that our babies can crawl around if they want to and explore. Same thing in our classrooms. We want to make sure that we have that open dialogue and allow our classes to feel like they can explore. The difference is that parent who doesn't let their baby crawl, doesn't let their baby down on the floor. They tell their baby what to do. They're with them all the time. And what happens is it inhibits the growth of the baby because they're not ever having a chance to actually find their way. Now, just like with a parent who has a baby that's crawling, you always want to be within arm's length. You want to be within arm's length so that if something happens and they fall, you can reach out and pick them up. But then sit back and still see them and still watch them. Same thing with our classes. We want to make sure that we give our class the tools that they need, the room to grow, and we also want to give them the feeling of safety and security that if you fall, we're here. So think about one of the lessons that you might be teaching. If you're teaching a lesson, you want to make sure that you have those open-ended questions, that you create dialogue, that you let them know, I have the information, I'm going to guide you along the way. But at the same time, you let them find it. Any questions so far? Okay, thank you for that question. So just to reiterate, what's the best way to become a leader in the classroom? Well, that goes on to our next slide, which is what leaders are. A leader is going to be a vision creator. They're going to be creating a vision the entire time, every day, of what their class needs to achieve. They're going to be building a team, not just building bodies, not just filling in warm bodies and chairs. You're actually going to build that team. You're going to be a task allocator. And what that means is you're going to be giving your team tasks to do to actually develop themselves, not just a chore list. You're going to be developing people, you're going to be motivating them, and you're going to be stimulating that growth. And that's the best way to describe what's the difference between being a leader, even in the word leading versus managing. Managing is more like you're keeping them right on the line. Leading is, okay, we're all walking the same path together. So a good way that you could become a leader in your classroom is by giving your learners a say in the classroom. And we're going to do an activity around that. Rules are always important, but you want to allow your class to have some say in the rules. And you want to give them guidance along the way of what those rules can be. Provide guidance to help your students along the way. And you don't want to be overbearing. You don't want to be the helicopter teacher. You want to even if they make mistakes, let them show you where that mistake is, and then correct it. And be nurturing and caring about that, because we all make mistakes just like that baby, but we're going to pick them back up, brush them off, and let them continue to walk. We want to give them a vision to work with. You always want to let your students know what the overall goal is for it. Don't ever let them be in the dark of what they're going to be achieving, because if they know they're going to be working towards something, they're more likely to buy into it. You want to show them the outcome, let them get input about how they think it should be structured, and always ask for feedback. Ask for feedback on how they feel things are going, how they feel lessons are going, how do they have any questions, concerns, issues, that you're there to lead them and guide them, not just lecture to them. And always give them positive and negative feedback, but in a constructive way, and ask for positive and negative feedback. And how you respond to it is going to be the biggest difference. So we're going to list the actions to be a leader in the classroom. And the first one is to be first. You want to set the mood, set the pace, set the standards. You want to walk that talk and be the rule in your class. But you also want to be fair. You don't play favorites. Share the credit with the class. If you all develop something together, give the whole class credit. Take the heat if something goes wrong, though, and admit your faults. You also want to be firm. Sometimes that leadership role can get a little gray because you're trying to develop people and you create a bond. But you also want to be firm, state the facts, get agreement, and explore for a solution. And last, you want to be flexible. You want to don't assume the best, make room for good ideas, and admit when you're wrong. Okay. So do I have any questions before we go into our activity? Okay, great. It seems like you all are already thinking about how you could lead versus just manage. Okay, so what I have is I have sent you all a sheet, and on that sheet is a break time. It should have break times at 10 o'clock, lunch is at 12, and last break is at 2 o'clock. Does everybody have that? Okay, so many of you, since you are in the classroom, have probably seen this several times. You've probably made one up, and it actually says the break times on it. Has anybody ever had anyone where your class has actually kind of complained that the break time were already established? Right. Usually someone does complain, and the reason why is when you come into the classroom, you want to give them structure. But something as easy as their break schedule is something that you could show yourself as being a leader and help them develop. So this is what I want to do. I want to take a couple of minutes. I'm going to break you all up into groups. Log onto your phones, and what I want you to do is I want your groups to collaborate about what would be the best break and lunchtime, and then I'll check back in with you in just a moment. Okay, we're back. Okay, so what did you all feel when you all were doing it? Okay, so some people are saying that they felt like they were collaborating and talking about the differences in times and which would work better. How did it make you feel to have that say so? Empowered? Like your voice was heard? Very good. And you felt like you were part of the situation. Very good, very good. All of those are the things. And it's the simplest thing, like by having your class actually choose their break and lunch schedule. And the thing is, you don't want to not guide them, though. You as the facilitator know what times are best. You also know what parameters might be in place, such as, like when the lunchroom opens, when food trucks are there, things in that nature. And you can give them that information because that's you being a guider. But at the end of the day, letting them collaborate and figure out that schedule. And then you all working together as a class to do so. So it's just think about something just like that and how you can apply those simple things to other pieces in your class. I'm so glad you all enjoyed that activity. So before we wrap up, because we've done a lot of things today in this brief 20 minutes, we stated the difference in leading and managing techniques in the classroom. We listed the criteria to become an effective leader, and we had you all participate in an activity. Remember that being a leader in the classroom, you want to be first, be fair, be firm, and be flexible. And I want you all to leave here today thinking about how you can change from just managing your class. You don't want to be just a taskmaster, you want to be a leader. Should you all have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me at nbradford@louisville.edu. And I also am going to be sending out a copy of this PowerPoint presentation that we have been using today so that you can go back to it. And I also will be including resources that you all can use about leading in the classroom. I hope you all have an enjoyable day, and I'll see you on our next webcast. Bye.